Well, welcome everyone. I'm really looking forward today to sharing with you our 2005 State of Sales. This is a good one for us because we've learned a lot of things that have happened in a very interesting year last year. Anytime there's an election year, we see a lot of things go backwards, and we'll see that. There are some things that improve too, but just really going to lay down the foundation for what we're hearing from other businesses in the United States, Canada, and the UK. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to talk about who we are just real briefly so you can understand what gives us the credibility and the information that feeds our report. How small businesses are rating themselves, and then those key trends that we're seeing. There are a few things that really just kind of jumped out to us. Like I said, in an election year, we always see some things that kind of tend to rise up. And then we're going to dive deeper into our 4 categories that are comprised of the report that we produce each year, and then we'll promote for you to get a free copy at the end, because we do have an ebook that continues to dig deeper, and really kind of giving you some high-level insights and then digging into a few things today, but it by any shape or means doesn't encompass the whole entire report that we do. Okay, so who are we? So we were founded in 2011, so we're working on our 14th year. We are the first and the largest national fractional sales leader organization. We have about 222 advisors. And as I mentioned earlier, that's in the US, UK, Canada, and then we just entered Australia this year. So just kind of growing into English-speaking countries. And we have been on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing private companies over 4 years. So what is it that we do, which is really kind of leads into how we get this information? We basically maximize efficiency for sales growth for companies. And we do this by our advisors go in and build a path to more sales. So they use it from everything that we know, from all the things that we have learned supporting all these organizations, and then their proven experience. All of our advisors are seasoned sales leaders. So they have to have a minimum of 20 years of sales experience with about 15 of them in sales leadership. So they really come in, it's the art and science of the two, and they really put together what we call our certified sales operating management system that addresses those 4 core areas that we'll dig into a little bit. But as a result of what we do for organizations, we see 98% of those businesses improve their revenue, and on average of about 32%. So it continues to kind of shape just who we are and what we do. And you'll pick up on more of that as we kind of talk about things throughout the presentation today. So let's step back then and talk about who took our sales agility assessment. So it is sent to small to mid-sized businesses, which is our profile of client that we typically work with. It doesn't mean we don't go up market. The smallest we work for is $1 million, not very often, but probably more like 3 million is the minimum, up to 300,000. We have worked with larger clients, so I'm not saying we don't, but that's the majority of the people that took the assessment. It's 1 person per company's results that we analyze and compare. Usually it's the CEO, president, CEO, the top level person in the organization. That is usually who hires us. It is not usually the sales leader. It is the CEO or president that has hired us to come in. And then the type of companies that you'll see in this report are 88% is B2B and 12% is B2C. And people have asked me why that is. And it's interesting. A data point that we have uncovered is that most of the time by a B2C company is in so much pain that it's kind of too late. And so B2B companies tend to do a little more planning and have a little more insight. And so that's really kind of shaped who is looking for that kind of support that we provide, and then ultimately take our assessment. We have this data that we're looking at today is from 4,840 assessments. Like I said, throughout those 3 countries, a little bit more swayed towards US because that's where we started, and then Canada next, and just a small sampling of UK. And it is 54 questions. So if anybody listened last year, it was 48 questions. We've added more questions on AI and some of marketing salesman alignment, which is one of the outcomes of AI, is just really continue to bring a lot of unification of those 2 teams together inside of an organization. So that is who took it. So what is the goal of our state of sales? This is really to provide you and our clients that our advisors work with, what is the key drivers of sales excellence? So you're self-assessing yourself to understand if you've built a robust sales strategy, if you put the right infrastructure and processes and support in place to drive your organization forward. Are you assembling and managing the right sales team? And then on top of that, do you have the right management structure to ensure all those things you put in place are being managed to, implemented, and continue to evolve for ongoing growth? So that's really what we're trying to do when we talk about our state of sales, bringing all this stuff to light for an organization that you need to do. So when they take the 54 questions, it's very specific. Are you doing this? Are you not doing this? And it allows them to really step back and think, oh my goodness, that's what I need to be doing. Okay, so what did we uncover this year? So poor scores. We don't like this, but we see this time and time again. And in 2025 result is 79% of companies gave themselves a poor rating. This was an 8% increase over last year, as you can see. And really at the core of that, we said is we see an election year. We see a lot of companies really just struggling in a year of technology change too, of chasing shiny objects, not putting things in place or trying to put things in place and not hitting the dial. So it's kind of set them back in some of the things that they need to do to run a sales organization. So as we continue to dig in, we'll learn a little bit more about this. So as I mentioned before, our report that we do and all of our questions fall into 4 key categories. So I'm going to share with you what these are just to continue to set these up. Your strategy. So this is really, what are you trying to accomplish as an organization? What does that tactically translate to? It's stuff like, what is the value proposition in the scripting that your salespeople are using? Who is your ideal client candidate profile? So that's kind of the industry. But more importantly, on top of that, who are the buyer personas inside there? It's amazing how many salespeople don't know who their buyer is. They may know we want to go after manufacturing, but who in there are you solving the need for and making sure they're getting to that right person? The competitors, and then it's all your KPIs and your tracking that you need to do as an organization. Whoops. And we see that 85% of companies have ranked themselves poor below average. And we saw a slight improvement. Usually we don't report on things that are so small, but we did think that was, any improvement in sales strategy to us is a good sign, because if you don't have the right strategy, it's hard to do any of the other things right, because then your methodology, your analysis, and your team don't even know what they're driving towards. So next up is sales methodology. And this is that process of what are all the steps of the sales cycle that your team needs to do. This is where we now put AI in there because it's changing the way you do your business. CRM, it's some forecasting, territories coverage. So it's a lot of just the methodology of how your team works. And this is an area that just continues to decline, and primarily in the process. It's amazing how many organizations have no insights, even at the leadership level, let alone all the way from the CEO to the sales leader, the sales team, of what are all the steps in a sales process to know if you are going to meet your sales goal. And that's at a client level, a prospect level. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we saw a 5% decline in this. So we are pretty much kind of showing that majority of organizations we talk to do not have their methodology in place. The next thing is analysis. So think of this as all the data. It's those sales goals, those quotas, those metrics, the reporting to understand if things are working for an organization. And we also saw companies continue to decline in this area. And 93% are doing poor or below average, and just really having all that right insights. It's interesting. We'll learn that a lot of people have a CRM and methodology, but in no way, shape, or form does it give them any of the insights or anybody putting anything in there. So that relationship is quite broken. And then organization. This is primarily the people part. So it's what are the roles and responsibility of the jobs? Do people have clarity? How do you hire? How do you onboard and train? Do you compensate your people right? And then do you even have meetings that are really meetings that are productive and insightful for what you need to do? And this one also had a decline. About 90% are doing a poor job in this area. So this is just kind of level setting for you what we've seen in our 4 key categories. I'll continue to dive deeper into these categories and pull out some highlights of some of these subcategories that I just discussed. But we're going to step backwards for a minute, and we're just going to talk about key trends in the changing sales landscape. It's interesting, with the last couple of years, just the evolution of everything that's happening in the technology space, that buyers are coming to companies informed. And that means they've done their research. And I think hopefully most people know this. But how do you solve for that? And it all really boils down to this changing sales landscape of personalization. So this cold calling and mass email campaigns is still way too many organizations are doing this, is increasingly ignored because people want you to know that you've done your homework, you've understood that they've been shopping, you understand what they know, you're listening effectively, you're analyzing if they went to your website, engaged, showed up on a webinar, met you. They want you to take that all into consideration when you actually start talking to them. And the beautiful thing about that is AI is going to give companies a competitive advantage because it's going to be able to automate those insights very, very quickly and help you with that personalized experience. And so doing that is mission critical. And 85% of companies are attempting to do this, but we'll talk to you about the attempt is very different than it actually working. So staying ahead of it is good, but whether or not you're doing the things that are actually moving the dial, we'll dig in deeper with some of our insights that we have today. Okay, so now let's go into some key trends we saw. And this one is interesting. What we felt was working, which is really not working. And when we get in further, we saw an improvement in forecasting, but it's still overall not going well. What we've seen is a 20% improvement in that people are getting more accurate at it, those that are doing it. And it starts with having the right tools in place, having a process that can actually tell you where you're at in the forecast. It's not just Joe saying, oh, yeah, I think that one's going to close. But is he at step 2 or 3 or 4, which is going to really give you a percentage of probability. And that's where companies fall down. So most of them are improving in that tracking tools. But once again, when you look at it globally, there's still a lot of work to do. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So what is not working? And a lot of it goes to staffing management. There's a theme here that we saw, particularly in the last 2 years. We're just continuing to see this is an area that goes backwards for organizations. And the hiring process. It's amazing to me. We hear this all the time. Oh, I just know a good salesperson when I see one. That kind of thinking is dead. There is so much opportunity today for an organization to really have clear expectations documented. It's important to start with, what are you advertising for? Are you making sure that the skills that your team that's interviewing is aligning to what you're hiring for? Putting the right person in the right seat, using assessments today. Assessment tools today will tell you who's a hunter, a farmer, who's good at relationship building, whatever that role is in there today. But it's very, very important that the sales seat doesn't become a revolving door. And it can easily do that if you don't have a hiring process put in place that's consistent for every staff member you hired for sales, and really for an organization. The next step, so it's been an 18% decline in people really doing a hiring process. Next is onboarding. This is another one that we hear so often. Oh, we bring them in for a week. We put them through our corporate onboarding, but they have their contacts. They just kind of, they know what to do. That couldn't be further from the truth. We saw a 12% decline in this. They need to be trained on what is your value proposition? What makes your company unique? What are the objections they may hear? How should they handle them? Who are you trying to sell to? And it just gets deeper and deeper, but there is an opportunity for so much more thorough onboarding for organizations to be a game changer and how quickly up to speed that person will perform. You may see some quick wins from them, but not long-term sustainable. If they do have a contact base that they just go back to some people, but sustainability, long-term happiness of the employee and happiness of you as the employer is from well thought out onboarding. And then performance management. If you don't hire the right person, it's even more important than ever to really have communicate those consequences for not meeting those expectations. So do you have scorecards that you're looking at with that team member on a frequent basis? Are you talking to them about what the consequences are? Are you putting them on a PIP at the right time and really managing them out of the organization if that's the answer? Or are they telling you they've not been trained well enough? Have they not been onboarded well enough? And that's something that you have to fix for them. So that performance management, just having that clear, open dialogue with them from both sides of the table, from the salesperson and the leader's perspective is mission critical for an organization. And companies are continuing to not make this a priority. And we saw a 13% decline in that. So we'll talk a little bit more about sales staffing and just some of the issues we're seeing there. Okay. So here's a big one, CEOs and sales leaders. So first off, they've never been in alignment, but particularly this last year, it's really gotten worse. Particularly what we're uncovering from CEOs, because you can see 83% of them said that they thought it was poor how well their team is performing. And it really boils down to is the lack of data that the sales leaders bring to the CEOs. So the sales leaders are giving themselves a better score, and it's probably because they are equipped, and maybe in some ways, maybe not, or just a little bit more optimistic. But it's the lack of data and insights that they give to the CEO to let them know where the forecasting is, to make sure that they're on track for the goals and objectives, how they're feeling about things. And we see that there's not good dashboards and communication happening and going to the CEO that's creating this biggest divide. So that's at the root of what's happening here. Okay, so now let's dive in. So strategy, as I shared before, it's the things that are really shaping what all the sales team needs to be doing, talking about, and striving in, basically rowing in the same direction, going after the right kind of clients, the right message, those right KPIs. So what are we seeing? The strategy. 81% of companies do not have a clear strategy. This number continues to always be in these high 80s as we see it year over year. It's amazing when you go into a company and you start interviewing the sales team and talking to them too. If you have them fill out the assessment, their lack of understanding what the real strategy is at a salesperson level is significant. The lack of unification. They don't have a defined value prop. Some of them make up their own or go off track, and their sales leader is not following along and making sure they're sticking to that script. But what really is the most important thing is really getting the team actively educated, onboarded, and clear on what your value prop is, and kind of constantly looking at that, looking at who you're selling to as the business evolves, making sure you have the right KPIs. They will change year over year as your business evolves as an organization, knowing who the competitors are, what's new, what's happening. I mean, I think of the CRM world, how fast that world is changing, and how important it is for, if you, let's say you worked for a pipe drive, what is Salesforce doing, right? So that you know what you're going up against and what's going to be important to your client that you offer that they don't. So it's very, very important that companies have that. And then what do they do after that strategy? They need to turn it into a playbook. And very, very few companies actually have a playbook, which we didn't even put that 97% stat. It's a question we just actually added this year. Do you have this all in a playbook? It's a core part of our offering of what we bring to a client. It's that go-to-market approach. And what's interesting is you dig then deeper under what goes in a playbook is 84% of clients do not know who their ideal client profile is. So remember, that is the type of industry you're going after, that kind of vertical, maybe a revenue size. And then you take it down to the next level, and it's the buyer persona. And that number is not on here, but at that level, it's even lower of how many people actually, it's up in the high 90s. Don't even then know, I do know who I'm supposed to sell to, but who am I supposed to get into there? Who's that key decision maker? 85% have no clear value proposition. And if you have different products, they don't even take it to that level. So they just really kind of let their salespeople make up the value proposition just based on snippets of things inside the organization, or maybe their sales leader or other sales reps talk about. And they may be hearing it from a sales rep that's not very good at their job on top of that. So you can see the compounding effect of that. So then competitor insights, I mentioned that before. It's so important to understand what you're going up against too. Now more than ever, particularly as I talk to in personalization, your competitor insights, you can use to your advantage to say, well, they do all this and that's not what you say that you needed, but we do all this. And 72% of companies do not have a good sense of that. They're not educating their advisors on that. They're sales leaders, they're sales reps. Nobody is informed on what their competitors are doing. So you're not giving them all the tools in their toolkit that they need. So can't stress enough. And it's now so easy with just using AI tools to really go out there and stay competitive or assigning it to someone's job on the team. And then the last thing that's probably one of the biggest issues that affects every part of everything we assess is sales process. They lack a documented sales process. So it leads to confusion, uncertainty. So what is that step? So after the first call, what do they go next? And as they go through the process, which could be anywhere from, 2 to 7 steps, maybe more in some cases if it's a really long sales cycle, but allows you to know what your probability of conversion is, which goes back to then doing proper forecasting. So as you can see, there's a lot of work to be done in strategy, and it is the thing that is really the foundation for being able to build the rest of the organization successfully. So going on to, so really the key message is clarity. If you're going to pick one thing that you were going to go do tomorrow out of our creating a proper strategy is get your value proposition right. It's not just a statement, it's your sales lifeline. Your team needs to know it. So craft it with a group of people, never in a vacuum, train on it, test it to a little bit, communicate it to clients, listen to what they're saying, are they responding to it, and let it guide every client interaction. Like I said, this is just one little piece of it, but we try to give you something to take away from here. If you're looking for a roadmap of something to do, this is where we would suggest you start, is get a really good, solid value proposition. Okay, let's talk about methodology. So this is that process, which we'll continue to talk about because it shows up in everything else here. AI, like I said, we added new questions. CRM usage, this is an area that we shake our head every time. How many organizations today are functioning without a CRM, or if they have one, hardly anybody's using it. And then this is the forecasting, territories, and coverage. So we're going to go to where we said forecasting is getting better, but it's also a big issue for most companies. So it's not up in the 80s and 90s. It's now at 70% of companies are forecasting in the dark. But the real issue with this is it creates that CEO dissatisfaction, like I mentioned before, but you have misallocated resources. You miss revenue targets because of it, because you may be just taking the word for your salespeople, or they may be always talking about things that are at the very, very beginning of a funnel, where it really is stuff that you want to know that's more at the farther end of the funnel. And then it uninforms your strategic decisions. Once again, if you don't have a process, it doesn't allow you to know what's broken and where you're losing lead opportunities. That's probably another one of the big things that forecasting does. It allows you to see where you're having drop off, and that's the area you need to go focus. So it's a great roadmap for understanding what you need to fix as an organization. So then AI, which is our favorite new topic, we'll talk a little bit. We bring a little bit of AI in here. We also have an incredible AI presentation that if you didn't get to watch it before, but any of our advisors can also give it to an organization. But the good news is 70% of companies have started using an AI tool. There's still a lot more work to be done. But the unfortunate part and the bad news, and even McKinsey and others have confirmed the same thing we're seeing, that companies have not been able to find a way to leverage AI to be a force multiplier to support your sales growth. And what does that mean, force multiplier? Is it basically showing up in sales growth? And I'll tell you the reason why we believe most of that's happening is because people are just chasing shiny objects versus picking the tools that solve a problem or meet a need that your organization has. Instead, somebody brought you something cool and we're like, oh, we'll just start here. Instead of going, does this solve a problem we have today? Because if it doesn't, then it's not going to do anything for your business. So in the next slide, we're going to talk to you about what we feel like are the 3 things if you're going to go start with a tool. If you haven't already, or maybe you've tried and you've kind of went, oh, that went nowhere. Call recording and note taking is table stakes. If you're not doing that today, then that is a problem. What does that do? It goes back to getting you clear insights on personalization for the future, better listening for your salespeople, so they're actually listening and not taking notes. So we call that active listening. But the note-taking tools today are amazing, and what they can point out to you that you may have missed. And so that's the value of them. Lead generation, there's so many tools out there that we do. We have a couple of favorites that our advisors really promote. And then, like I said, it all ties back to allowing you to do personalized messaging. So as a bonus on here today, because we do think it's so much value, we have an AI sales assessment that you can take. What it does is it tells you the different types of problems it can solve. So it helps you prioritize those problems first and foremost that you have. And then it gives you a whole list of tools that could solve for those problems. So this is not anything more than a tool for you to just wrap your head around where in the world you can start with AI as it relates to sales. So highly recommend, if that's a need that you feel like your company has, take a quick snap of this QR code and take the assessment. And we do think it's going to give you some incredible actionable insights. Okay. So now we move on to sales analysis. So this is all the data, those team and individual goals. So what are those numbers? What are those scorecards? What are those quotas the team has? And then what's the metrics and reporting of how they're doing against all those numbers that you're using as an organization? So sales analysis. This is the thing that is always a head shaker for us. That 80% of sales team members do not have clearly track sales activities and goals. And why companies allow this to happen is puzzling to us, because it's not only about just doing the activities, but it's the right activities. And there's so much you can track. So making sure that they're doing the right activities and that's what they're reporting on is even more important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And that'll be on the next slide. I want to talk about kind of also, then you just kind of go backwards. So that slide was at an individual sales rep. But then when you step back, what's really important for an organization to do is to make sure that your corporate goals, your quarterly goals or monthly goals, however you guys look at them, are the sales rep knows where they fit into that quarterly, monthly, annual goal. And people don't do that for a lot of their sales teams. So they don't understand that you are responsible for 10% of our revenue, rolling it up. And so 78% of companies says they don't give their sales reps that clarity of where they at in helping the company meet their entire goal for the year, month, quarter. And then what's even worse is that leadership doesn't have an insight into those current sales performance. So they don't know. They don't know if we're meeting it a lot of times. So after the fact, they may count on their finance department to tell them. But that all should be tracked in a CRM, giving somebody really, really clear insight on what's happening in the organization. And once again, as I mentioned before, this is where CEOs become very dissatisfied with understanding what's happening. So, data is king with sales. It reveals the impact and it brings more decision science to your decisions. It allows you to know if you need to pivot as an organization quickly. So without all these right things, it just really cripples an organization to really meet their sales goals. So let's talk about that. So you got to make sure that your KPIs are important. So I put calls on here, but let's talk about calls, because this could be a misleading stat, because calls for call's sake doesn't drive sales. In many cases, it can, right? So hopefully for every 10 calls, it converts to one sales, but many organizations don't have that, particularly as it gets to larger product sales, things that are more expensive, complex. So the right thing for you might be none of these things that we've mentioned on here, and it may be what's at proposal stage, right? And so it's really making sure you have the right KPIs that are really going to give you the insights to the business movement as an organization. And so these are what I consider the low-hanging things, but the things that are just really starting to begin the funnel. But what's more important is the things that continue watching those things go down the funnel. So we have a document that we call the leading and lagging indicators, and it lists out every type of thing that you could possibly think to track. And so if you would like a copy of that, because we could go on this, we could just do a call on that. We're going to put in there what you can email, and we'd be happy to send you a copy too. Or if you work with a local advisor, ask them to go over it. And in our framework offering, we put that document in as part of that, helping people establish those KPIs that they're really the critical ones for your business. There is not a one size fits all. So when you read articles about that, that is just some nice high level guidelines, but you really have to sit down and tailor them to your business, your sales cycle, and a lot of other particular things. So if you're interested, just send a note. Jen put a note in there to SX at salesxceleration.com. We'd be happy to share it with you. Okay. So now let's move on to the people part of the business. So this is that roles and responsibilities, hiring, onboarding, training. You can read the rest, compensation. That's a lot of the stuff, if we don't talk about it here, is inside of our ebook. So we continue to dig further onto some of these things. And like I said, it's a little bit more of a heavy read and just trying to really unpack what's happening and really help you uncover things that you need to be doing as an organization. So I talked a little bit more before about onboarding, that has a huge ramification on setting someone new up for success, not only short-term, but long-term. But what we see time and time again is sales training just not happening, little to no. What we will sometimes see is, oh, we did it 2 years ago. Well, sales training doesn't last 2 years. Sales training should be something that you're doing monthly and quarterly. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and buy a huge complex sales training system, which there's modules in some training systems. There's opportunities just to train on something that you continually hear from your sales team. So they may all be getting stuck at the same pain point. And if you're having weekly team meetings, you should be listening for that and then knowing that's a sales training need. So that's really what we're talking about with sales training. It's a combination of proven systems that are in the marketplace today, as well as feedback you're hearing from your sales leaders, sales team, your sales leaders here, that they need to be educating the team on so they can help them break through and remove roadblocks and obstacles for them. And training pays off. I can't stress that enough. It just continues to standardize your go-to-market strategy. It increases your revenue. It can also have an impact on your sales cycle length. And it can improve retention. People don't understand that. People leave companies, not only do they quit bosses, but they also quit when the fact that they don't feel like you're investing in them for growth and to be able to be successful at their job. So it's really, really important that you think of training from a new lens as the impact it has on an organization, because many of times it's one of the things that people will discount or not invest in. And like I said, some of it doesn't even require an expense. It requires proper listening from your sales leader to know what the team needs help on. Okay. So one-on-ones plus team meetings. And there's no other way to say this is what creates success. If you aren't having weekly one-on-one meetings with your sales team and with your sales reps, that is a big mess. This is the opportunity for you when you get in front of those sales teams members to share with them, wins. That's the opportunity for you to listen and learn what you need to then train on them. You can do some small training in there. You're looking at your scorecards, your KPIs as a team, looking how you're doing as an organization. It's also a place to kind of let them see how they're doing against their peers. Nothing drives a salesperson, a really true hunter, more than seeing where they're at against some of their peers. And then the weekly one-on-ones are so important because it allows you to then get under the hood with that salesperson. How are they doing on their KPIs? How can you remove roadblocks? What do they need help with? And for you to start to understand, maybe you have the wrong person in the wrong seat. So it's that opportunity now, as we talked before, that performance management to coach them. Unfortunately, you may have to bring a performance plan into it, get that started. But without the proper communication and routinely, the worst case scenario would be biweekly, but weekly is what we suggest. Then you're just basically providing a team no guidance on how to get better, or just help them celebrate successes and acknowledge them. So that's really, really what we consider a table stake for every sales organization. We also have really clear guidelines on what we think a successful sales team meeting should be run. And so that's something also that you can get from us or from a sales team, one of our advisors for your sales team, and or one-on-one for individuals. They do work pretty similar, but there are some nuances in what we suggest is a well-run sales meeting. Okay, so the power of one, as I talked a little bit more, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of it, but it is just really an important part of holding that sales rep accountable. I can't, there's no other way to do it without talking with people one-to-one. There's no, just thinking they know, or the CRM says it. You cannot take the communication piece out of really running a well-organized team and down to the individual level. So this is what I said. We'd be happy to send you a copy of that sales meeting agenda. And then, just continuing on, foster team alignment and collaboration. A lot of things that we get when we do our 4.0, at the end of it, if we have the sales team take it, it shows you the difference scores of your sales team. What you will see is 9 times out of 10, the lack of complete alignment on goals, KPIs, not feeling informed and trained, because the scores are all over. We do show a report at the end, like I said, and usually the majority of it is yellow or red, showing massive disalignment or a significant disalignment. And so that meeting is probably one of the first things that starts to create that alignment within a team. When you're building that strategy, continue to talk through it, talking through those processes, just getting everyone rowing in the same direction. So that's really what we're trying to drive home here. And we uncover huge disconnects when we have that assessment taken by the sales team, the sales leader, and then the CEO. And the quickest fix is just getting everybody in a meeting every week. Okay, so that's it. That's what I have for today. People always ask, well, what's our process? So this is what we do, that comprehensive assessment. So that's what we just talked about today. It's called our Sales Agility Assessment. It's 54 questions. It really uncovers it, which we do that. We get the gaps in that organization. We come in and we develop a solution with our expert, execution by advisors and skyrocketing growth. Like I said, on average, 32%. And we are able to fix 98% of the clients we get into. A lot of times if we can't fix them, it's lack of being able to make change in an organization, which we hate seeing, but it does happen sometimes. So we're really not consultants because our advisors go in and do the work. So what we'd like to offer you at the end, as I mentioned before, is our ebook for the state of sales. It gives you a deeper insight into what is happening. So if you just want to take a picture of this QR code, it's different than the one for the AI assessment. But you can also send a note to Jen, who's out here. We'll be monitoring. We have an email called S and then X at Sales Xceleration. Make sure you're spelling acceleration with the X on here. And we'd be happy to send you the things we talked about today was the sales meeting agenda, the leading and lagging indicators. If you missed the QR code for the AI assessment, be happy to send that to you. And then also our ebook. We don't traditionally share the presentation because the presentation is something that our advisors give, but the ebook has a lot more depth in this presentation. So that's what we'd be happy to share with you. I know someone asked for it, but what we share is the ebook. So the presentation is something we go out and we give out into meetings and clients and things like that. So we don't just distribute it widely. So if there's I don't think we have questions that I didn't answer along the way. It's interesting. Someone put in here that AI can create a playbook. And I want to address that misnomer. Could it? Sure it can. But you're only as good as, do you know what's effective in a playbook? And it's interesting. We Google it periodically, what should be in a playbook. And it's missing a lot of critical components. And it requires thought and conversation and dialogue. And you can't get that unless you put that all into AI and then know what you need to be looking for to clean it up and get it working right. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying you really, really need an expert that's guiding and looking at the playbook for it to really be as effective. Otherwise, it'll just be another tool collecting dust on the shelf. And it does need to be AI enabled so that your team can use it. So once again, a flat document, that is a thing of the past. You need to have tools and stuff that it integrates within your CRM to really make it useful. So it's the only comment I wanted to talk about that was something that someone had put in. So yeah, that's it. So I think that's all I have today. Thank you again for joining us. If you also can always visit our website, you can find a lot more different reports and case studies. And if you want to find a local advisor in your community to talk further about this, they're always free to just have a conversation with you and just learn more about your business and maybe how they can help or some tools that we have to help you. So thank you everybody for your time today.